Hey everyone, how you doing? This is Amon Green, Green Bay Packers all-time leading rusher, and you're watching Packers Total Access Live, your daily source for Packer content. Go Pack, go!
What's up, guys? Welcome to Packers Total Access. My name is Clayton. You can check us out on packernet.com. Find me on Twitter at Packers_access. It is the day after the debacle in Chicago. Obviously, a huge, tough loss to the Chicago Bears there at Soldier Field. Listen, there's a bunch of different directions we could go after this loss. If you want to make excuses for injuries, boy, you've got plenty of them. And I don't say that in a negative, condescending way. If you're a fan that says, no excuses, you had that game in the bag, I can understand that standpoint too, right? I'm kind of somewhere in between, I believe. As you guys know, kind of talked about it, caught a lot of heat leading up to this game. Mostly direct messages, but some in the YouTube comments all week long where it's like it kind of feels like we're going to split with the Bears. Going into the season, I felt like we were going to split with the Vikings and the Lions. And then the way the season unfolded, you end up sweeping the Lions, obviously. You go out and you take care of business against the Bears a couple weeks ago, and then going into this game last night, you had the chips stacked up against you. And I just want to be very clear, man. If there's a portion of the fan base that's hearing this and going, you can't use injuries as excuses, that is such a weird comment, in my opinion. That's like saying if you don't spend any money in free agency, if you don't do anything in the draft, you trade away all your draft picks and you don't sign any free agents, that would be the equivalent of saying, well, there's no excuses. You still need to win with a lesser team, because that's what it comes down to. When you're missing that many starters, I mean, my goodness, it's what else do you expect to happen, right? There comes a point where you're so banged up, you're so injured that you've got to acknowledge that, okay, the chips are kind of stacked against us. And this is how I felt in 2010. As a Packer fan, obviously didn't know near as much about football as I do today. You're talking about, gosh, it's crazy to think it's, 15 years ago, right? But that's the reality. That's the reality of the entire situation. Is back then, you have all these injuries pile up, and you go, okay, there comes a point where you go, all right, guys, this just ain't the year. It's hard to accept that as a fan. And I'm not saying that's the case that we're at right now, but that's how I felt in 2010. And then you go on a run. So you've always got to kind of hold out that little glimmer of hope that it's like, okay, maybe they can put together a run here and create some momentum going in. To me, it's just kind of the worst case scenario of both situations when you go into that game and you play a couple of guys hurt and then you come out and you're even more banged up than you were going into that game. Like we're waiting to hear about Josh Jacobs, obviously, right? We're waiting to hear about Jordan Love. I see a lot of questions in the comments about what's the severity of Jordan Love's injury. It seems a little weird to me. They wrote it a concussion, and that would suggest that, okay, a full week of concussion protocol, he should be good to go because it's not going to be a short week. It's going to be a 7-day turnaround, right? Play again next Saturday. But at the same time, I don't know, it looked a little weird to me how they were a little concerned with his neck on the surface. You know what I mean? Like when he was on the ground, they were kind of positioning his neck. He laid there for a second. It's like not just your normal concussion. Also, typically they go in the blue tent. It's a concussion. You guys correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. Again, I may be completely off base here. But you get a concussion, and then they just kind of hang around the sideline, right? Well, we seen them. They took him in the blue tent. They diagnosed it a concussion, and then they walked him to the back, right? And to the best of my knowledge, I didn't see him back on the sideline. I'm not saying he wasn't back on the sideline. Everything's kind of a blur. I just wonder if there's some other things going on there. Yeah, as Ari Ironminer says in the chat, time will tell. That's exactly right. So we're awaiting that information. So now you're starting QB. There's a chance he could miss against Baltimore. I hope that's not the case. But now Josh Jacobs, I don't know how you guys feel, but to me, he didn't look nowhere near 100% last night. He struggled to run the rock. Manuel Wilson had a lot more success than him. He had the fumble. And again, it's easy to jump all over Josh Jacobs for the fumble. Again, that's one of those calls too that I look up and go, how long did they allow them to stand up? Forward progress had been stopped. He'd been pushed back 3 yards, and then they're able to strip the ball out. It's like, I obviously don't understand that rule anymore as well. So just a lot of things to talk about here, and that's not what this particular video is about. We probably lost people that clicked on it for the thumbnail and for the title. They probably said, well, that's not what he's talking about. I'm moving on. I completely understand that. So let's get into what we wanted to talk about here, okay? And that is the playoff chances of the Green Bay Packers as it sits right now. And on the thumbnail, you've got the 82%. That's what I'm seeing across the board, 82 to 85%. There's a lot of games that are going on right now as we speak. I'm going to give you guys an update on that. But let's start with the standings, okay? And these are the NFC standings, and you can see some people are already eliminated. Some teams are already, locked their spot up. And this is what we've got so far, okay? So starting at the top, the Seattle Seahawks, they have clinched a spot here as the X obviously means clinched a playoff berth. Just want to double check that. The Bears still have not clinched their playoff berth according to this particular standings here on ESPN.com. They're sitting at 11-4 in the number 2 spot. The Philadelphia Eagles have clinched a playoff spot. They've actually clinched their division at 10-5 in the NFC East. You've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 7-7. They haven't clinched anything altogether just yet. The Rams have clinched a playoff spot at 11-4 in the number 5 spot. The number 6 spot is the San Francisco 49ers. They haven't clinched anything yet. They're sitting at 10-4, and your Green Bay Packers have not clinched anything yet at 9-5-1. Now, right behind them are the Detroit Lions at 8-6 and the Carolina Panthers at 7-7. So essentially, from the Green Bay Packers standpoint here, you have 3 teams battling for the number 7 spot, right? That's the Packers at 9-5-1, the Lions at 8-6, and the Carolina Panthers at 7-7. So again, those are the 3 teams we're kind of keyed in on right now. All right. Now, again, this doesn't mean the Packers can't win the North. You're just kind of looking at that last spot in the playoffs as it sits at the moment. Okay. So now if we switch gears and say, all right, let's just look at the playoff hunt here. Let's see if anything changes on the surface. Again, everything's kind of lined up the way we just talked about. So it's a 3-team race for the number 7 spot, and there's some shuffling that could take place there in between. You could really say there's a 4-team race for the last 2 spots, right? That's also a case and scenario there as well. So we close that on off now. Let's look at some of the games. Boy, I hate it when it does that. Lord have mercy, that's ugly. Let's now look at the scores around the league here, okay, according to ESPN. This is what's going on right now. We're going to hit refresh just to make sure everything's still up to date. Here's what we got. The Bills are currently leading the Browns 20-10. The Chargers are leading the Cowboys 21-17. The Cowboys have been eliminated already. The Chiefs are trailing the Tennessee Titans 9-3. That's a wild thing to think about, right? You got the Bengals currently leading the Dolphins at 17-14. You've got the Jets are trailing the Saints 9-6 in that game there. And then you've got the Vikings leading the Giants right now. It's about to go into halftime. The Vikings are leading the Giants 13-10. So, again, when we went back to the playoff scenario there, wish I had closed that out, we'll kind of take a quick look and see what's going on, because I think the Vikings, obviously, yes, they have already been eliminated, right? I think we already kind of covered that, playoff hopes. The Vikings have been eliminated. So there's really nothing to play for there, although coming up in week 7 or week 18, Packers, Vikings, obviously the Vikings are looking to play spoilers, right? There's nothing they would love more than to knock the Packers out of the playoffs if it comes to that. You got the Buccaneers currently trailing the Panthers. And again, the Panthers are one of those teams that we just talked about, right, that are still in the hunt. So we're looking for the Buccaneers to win that game, obviously, to go ahead and knock the Panthers on out. I think it is a lose and they're out scenario there, I believe, but I could be wrong. Actually, they're still playing for their division, so they're still a little bit hopeful there as well. Now, when you get into the 4 o'clock window, those are the games that are going to matter, right? Here's what we've got. Jaguars at the Broncos in the AFC. That's obviously a 10-4 team versus 12-2 team. You get the Falcons at the Cardinals. Nothing on the line there in terms of playoffs. Steelers at the Lions is the big one that we want to watch. It's kicking off at 4:25. I imagine that will be Jim Nantz and Tony Romo calling that game. What I'm thinking about doing is going live toward the end of that game, maybe in the 4th quarter of that game, and almost doing like a watch along, a watch party, because here's the reality. If the Steelers beat the Lions, the Packers are in the playoffs. That's essentially what that means, to the best of my knowledge, right? So obviously we got a chance to clinch a playoff berth if Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers go into Detroit and beat the Detroit Lions, who are sitting at 8-6. Both teams are sitting at 8-6. Now, on the road this year, the Steelers have been 3-3. The Lions at home 5-2. So you kind of feel like the Lions should have the upper hand in that matchup. Then you get the Raiders at the Texans. And then, of course, Sunday Night Football is the Patriots at the Ravens. So if the if the Steelers win and they improve to 9-6, and the Ravens lose to the Patriots, they fall to 7-8. I want to say that statistically, mathematically, will probably be close to eliminating the Ravens. I'm not sure if it's 100%. You guys double check that. If you have that information, throw it in the chat for us. So there's a little bit on the line there for Sunday Night Football. We're all Patriots fans tonight, rooting against the Ravens, because if you do get in the position where the Ravens go, our crap, we're out, we're eliminated, maybe you don't get their best roster next week, right? Some of that stuff's going to come into play. But again, somebody do a quick check on that. Can the Ravens be eliminated with a Steelers win and a Patriots win tonight, or a Ravens loss, better way of putting it? I'd like to know what's on the line there. Let us know in the chat if you have that information. So if we switch gears now and we go ahead and remove that, and we jump to the playoff simulator and just take a quick glance there. I'll keep those windows open so we've got them as quick reference. When we look at the playoff simulator, according to ESPN, if I could find it, the playoff machine, and just take a quick glance here, let's see what falls into place for the Packers. We kind of hit this a little bit last night as well on the post-game show, right? Just kind of diving into some of the scenarios. So week 16 here. Let's say the Steelers do beat the Lions, right? The Packers remain the 7 seed. Let's see with the game there at the end of the night. Let's say the Patriots win that game. We go fast forward to the next week. Obviously, that's going to put the Baltimore Ravens a little bit lower on the scale here. They would be 7-7. Buffalo would be getting the nod. The Chargers would be getting the nod. I'm trying to just kind of take a quick glance. Yeah, I think that kind of puts Baltimore out, right, guys? If Baltimore loses tonight, right? If Baltimore loses tonight on Sunday Night Football and the Steelers were to win, I don't see a scenario where they could creep back up into the playoffs. So that's just something to kind of keep our eye on. But again, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is the Packers controlling their own destiny. That's still in play, but you got to go out there. You got to beat the Baltimore Ravens next week, obviously, and you want to take care of business there against the Vikings in the final week. So it does kind of feel like you need to win out here, although if the Lions do drop that game today to the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are going to be eliminated from the playoffs. So if the Lions win that game, boy, oh boy, things just got interesting, right? Because you go into next week, and if the Lions take care of business against the Vikings and you drop that game to the Ravens, you're all of a sudden out of this game, right? So, or out of the playoffs, I should say, for the most part, unless the 49ers just drop a turd here at the end, right? And the Packers win out. There is a scenario there, right? If we go back and the Bears beat the 49ers, and the Packers continue to lose next week, if that's the case, along with the 49ers today, if they somehow, some way lost to the Colts, you're coming into that week 18 scenario where if the Packers take care of business against the Vikings and the Seahawks beat the Niners could drop out. So essentially what it means is the Niners would have to lose out, right? That's what you're coming away with here. So going to be really interesting to see how the playoffs kind of unfold down the stretch. Hopefully we gave you an idea of what's on the line here. Again, if you clear all the criteria and obviously the results, what it comes down to tonight, if the Steelers win that ball game, the Packers are in the playoffs. So, or yeah, at the 4:25 kickoff. So what we're going to do here a little bit later, gang, is we're going to go live in the fourth quarter and do a show for you guys. We'll give you the PFF grades from the game yesterday, the loss to the Bears there, and obviously give you the end results of the Lions-Steelers game. So we are all rooting for Aaron Rodgers to come away with a win there. Obviously, that's going to be huge for the Packers to make the playoffs. Now, I understand there's a portion of the fan base that's probably looking at this going, what does it matter, Clayton? Can we really go on a run and win the Super Bowl with all of these injuries? I understand that. I do. Like I said, yesterday was kind of a worst-case scenario. The team was playing great coming down the stretch. You had that game well in hand. You had a number of different things that had to go wrong for the Packers to lose that game, and all of those things basically went wrong, you know. I hate to say this because I don't like to put it on one player, and you guys know I'm not putting it on one player, but you got to call a spade a spade. Keyshawn blows 2 coverages, and that kind of puts them in a position to win that ball game. Romeo Doubs drops the onside kick. Obviously, if we recover that onside kick, we probably go on and win that ball game as well, them needing 7 points and the clock ticking, right? So It's going to be really, really, really interesting to see how everything kind of lays out here. So that's really strange. Joe Pack Joe. Now let the Lions win out. I need Chicago to be on top of the world, only to miss the playoffs. Yeah, Bob. I'm not on board with that. I never look at it through the lens of rooting against another team over giving the Packers the best chance of making the playoffs. That's just me, though. So we'll have to agree to disagree there. All right. So Ari Ironminer said, "How can we still win the division?" Let's talk about that real quick. All right. So in order to win the division, let's throw it back up real quick. This is what's would have to happen. All right. For us to win the division, it would take, let's just fast forward to week 17. This is really a conversation that just includes us and the Bears, right? We would have to beat Baltimore next week, and the 49ers beat the Bears. You notice they're still in first place in the NFC North. And then in week 18, us beat the Vikings, and the Bears would have to lose to the Lions. Okay. So if that happens, the Packers win the North at 11-5-1, which is wild to think about. It really is. So it would take the Bears losing the next 2 weeks, right? So if that happens and the 49ers beat the Bears next week, and then, of course, the Lions beat the Bears in the final week of the season, the Packers would be NFC North champions. We would host a playoff game. That is kind of the best case scenario for the Packers, right? Now, if tonight, let's say that the Steelers don't win that game and the Lions win, then the Lions have something to play for next week, right? So that's probably the scenario Joe Pack Joe is talking about, right? Where you kind of get into a situation where, okay, if that happens, let me drop that off the screen. I apologize. If you get into a situation where that happens, right, then okay, you're kind of rooting for the Lions, right, to upset the Bears in the following week. I can kind of see that scenario there, right? So again, if the Lions win tonight, then we are not in the playoffs necessarily yet, right? But if they win tonight, then they've got something to play for next week against the Vikings. If they win that game, right? And let's say we win our game. Actually, let's say we lose our game. Now the Lions are all of a sudden in, right? So that's the problem with that scenario with us going after the North. So if the Lions win outright here, they're going to try to, continue to make the playoffs, but that would knock the Bears down. However, it's going to come down to the Packers having to take care of business in those final weeks. And obviously that would put us in a situation where we could potentially win the North. Although with that scenario there, we did not do anything with the Bears. It's going to take an epic collapse from the Bears. It would take the 49ers beating and this could all happen. I say epic. I mean, that's very realistic, right? I mean, what you're essentially saying is in week 17, can the 49ers beat the Bears? Absolutely they can, right? And the 49ers are trying to hold on as much as they can too. Now, is there a situation where the 49ers could clinch the playoffs with no other benefit going into week 17 and sit their starters? That question comes into play, right? So now we're going down multiple rabbit holes here, right? So really what it comes down to is just take care of business, win your games, win out. You need to win out. We talked about it originally. You need to win 12 games to get in. You can't depend on just winning 11 games. And now we've gotten ourselves in that situation, right? Where if you win the next 2 weeks, you're going to finish with 11 wins. You'll be 11-5-1, and you still make the playoffs. But that tie has really played a huge role in this whole season, which is wild to think about, right? Yeah, that would be awesome, right? Pac-Man says, can you imagine the Bears losing the division because of our nemesis, the 49ers? LOL. That would be wild. So there's a chance the Bears could lose these next 2 games. You needed that game last night, man. You needed it bad. It's just everything would be right in the world today if that were the case, if you had won that ball game last night. And it sucks because you had it. And I'm seeing people call him for the firing of Matt LaFleur again. It's a very, very minute but very, very loud portion of the fan base. I don't know how you can put that loss on LaFleur last night, man. I just don't get it. I feel like he schemed his ass off. He had his backup quarterback. Just going up and down the field. Look at what he was having to play with out there. You lose Josh Jacobs at the end of that game, right? You've lost Jordan Love. You're already playing with a makeshift offensive line where there's pretty much, your best starters, Elton Jenkins on IR, Zach Tom out this game, right? You're missing Evan Williams on the defensive side of the ball. all these things that came into factor last night. And here we came down to the end of the game, and you had your starters that were still in the game, Keyshawn Nixon, blow the two coverages. You had Romeo Dobbs. Again, I question anyone. I don't know of anyone that would rather there be another receiver on that onside kick trying to field the ball than Romeo Dobbs. Maybe Matthew Golden, in my opinion. Other than that, and it is worth noting that Josh Jacobs was actually on the return team, that hands team, for the onside kick recovery too. So how hurt is he, right? Can he actually get healthy in 7 days? I don't know if he can. It doesn't feel like he can, based off of, the way he played last night, and he just looked banged up. He really did. So I'm with you, Coach. I think Matthew Golden's probably the only other one, right? Yeah. So it's a tough loss, but hopefully you guys got a little bit better idea of the playoff scenario. That was the purpose of this video, was just kind of run it down real quick. We're keeping our eye on these games. In terms of the early window here, there's really not a whole lot going on. I don't think there's anything other than the Panthers, right? We want the Panthers to lose that game. And as it sits right now, just to get you guys a quick update, the Carolina Panthers are currently, where'd that game go? They are currently leading at the half 13-10, right? So although they've got the same record, so I guess the Buccaneers jump right into the Panthers spot, right? Whichever team wins that game, the Bucs will win their division. No, yeah, we want the Bucs to win this game. We want the Bucs to win this game and beat the Panthers down a little bit. And that's the only game in the early window here that I can think of that really makes a lot of sense for the Packers. So the big one today, 4:25 kickoff, 3:25 Central, is going to be Steelers at the Lions. And then obviously we want the Patriots to beat the Baltimore Ravens in that game tonight. Hopefully we get ourselves in a situation where we can maybe face not the starters there against the Baltimore Ravens. And I haven't been keeping up with them much here lately. I mean, obviously they're having a down year, and it's a little early to look ahead. We got a lot to cover, to unpack from this loss to the Bears before we jump ahead to the Baltimore Ravens. But yeah, I mean, them sitting at 7-7 kind of tells the story, right? So yeah, going to be interesting. Going to be really, really interesting. You're welcome, John. John says, thanks for the update. Needed a lift. Absolutely, man. Again, we got to put things into perspective, right? It's an uphill battle for this Packers team, who it's a lot of injuries to overcome for the rest of the season. But man, we're going to be here every step of the way. And this is what the NFL is all about, man. All it takes is getting a ticket to the dance, and you never know what's going to happen, right? And you've seen last week, the New England Patriots going to that week, it's like they're the best team in football, right? Arguably. And then they had that epic collapse. And then you got the Denver Broncos, who we went up against last week, and we were banged up like we have been here recently. And what happened? You had it within one score of arguably the best team in the league. You get a couple of balls bouncing in your direction there, you could have beat the best team in the National Football League, sitting there at 12-2, right? They would be sitting at 11-3 right now. And then it would be the Seattle Seahawks you probably look at as the best team, which you had the LA Rams that everybody was adoring last week. They had an epic collapse against the Seattle Seahawks. That's the league, man. That is the league. Professor Case, that is perfect, man. That's the person I thought of too on the hands team. Tucker, he said Tucker was the hands guy. Absolutely. That's probably the guy I would want recovering that, because he's going to absorb that hit too. You could tell Romeo started backpedaling like, oh, crap. He's got three guys gunning at him as the ball's approaching him. And it takes a different kind of cat to field that and take that hit, right? So going to be interesting there. Pac-Man says in the chat, Matt LaFleur did say on TV that Jacobs was our backup quarterback if Willis went down. My guess is he just didn't want to chance his injury. That makes a lot of sense, right, Pac-Man, that you got to kind of hold him out because he's the emergency quarterback. That's wild, isn't it? Absolutely wild. I think Savion's probably better fit for that in terms of a skill standpoint. He got some quarterback background, but he probably doesn't have a grasp of the offense quite like Josh Jacobs does, right? And they probably got a backup plan there with Josh Jacobs that you go to a Wildcat kind of, package and just go, right? So last one here, Jack in the chat. Appreciate you, Jack. He says, Matt LaFleur coaches his ass off, but I understand people being frustrated with him, with the team comes out and only plays for 55 minutes. I mean, yeah, if you want to put that on the coach, I'm sorry. I just don't, I have to respectfully disagree. I don't see how it's Matt LaFleur's job to make sure Keyshawn is in the mode there down the stretch, right? Again, and with Keyshawn, it's not like he wasn't out there trying. So, It was just he's too aggressive, biting on the stuff underneath, and he just got caught kind of floating on that look where I've watched it back 1,000 times, and we'll get into it on Chalk Talk. To me, on that release, when you give a semi-stack look there, they're looking to try to confuse your DBs. And the way that typically plays is if you're the corner on the right, whether you're in man coverage or zone, right? If you're the corner on the right, whoever releases, it could be the one opposite side release inside, and he becomes the 2. That's the guy you go with. Or if the 2 just stays on your area, you go with him. So it's essentially you let them declare, and then you go in your direction. And Key just kind of didn't cover anybody. Kind of got caught in no man's land there. It was a tough look, man. So, yeah. And then we got Professor Cake says, no, Matt called a great game. Disagreeing with Matt. I agree. And listen, again, I can understand how Matt would have an opinion. Everybody, everybody's got their own opinion on who you put the blame on. If somebody said, we're blaming Matt LaFleur. Somebody said we're blaming Romeo Dobbs. We're blaming Keyshawn Nixon. We're blaming just, insert a name, right? We're blaming the Bears defender that led with the crown of the helmet and smacked Jordan Love with the helmet hit. Yes, I agree with all of them. There's enough fault to go around, but it's just when you don't have as much veteran leadership on a team, and then on top of that, the youngest roster in the league is banged up, so you're now down to borderline practice squad guys in some cases. It's going to be hard to win those close games, because again, at the end of the day, if you've got a close game, you got a one-possession game, and you're looking, okay, man, we need people who have been here. They've done that. They've got the experience, right? That's kind of what you lean on the most. I'm sure Coach Lynn can attest to this, right? Like it's no matter what level you're coaching at, whether it's high school, college, or pro, when the game's on the line, you don't think, get me my young athletic guy out there to win the ball game. You're probably thinking, especially in a situation like last night where you're just kind of holding on to a win as everything's crumbling around you, you probably want a veteran guy out there, right? You want a guy that makes the quarterback throw an absolutely perfect throw rather than give him a wide open slam dunk touchdown there toward the end because you're being too aggressive, right? So, yeah. Anyway, we could talk about this all day. I really appreciate everybody jumping in here on short notice. This was a fun little conversation. Hopefully everybody's got an idea of what we're looking at here. Someone asked what the actual percentage was, and it is 82%. That's correct. They actually asked specifically, is 82? Yeah. Jay Spear says in the chat, so we have an 82% chance now. That's what I'm seeing, 82 to 85% chance of making the playoffs. And again, it really just comes down to winning your last 2 games or the Lions losing this game tonight and you're in the playoffs. But again, if the Lions lose tonight, they don't have nothing to play for the next 2 weeks, then maybe they don't march their starters out there against the Bears, and all of a sudden the Bears kind of run away with the division as opposed to the Bears potentially dropping 2 in a row, you winning out, and you win in the division. So we could still win the division, and we've got an 82% chance of making the playoffs. That's the gist of I could have done a 2-minute video, right? We would have got to the end of it, but I'm glad we had this conversation for sure, man. Appreciate everybody jumping in here. But we'll be back tonight. Like I said, it'll probably be around 6 p.m. Central, maybe a little bit earlier. We want to catch the 4th quarter of the Steelers-Lions game if it's close, and we'll give you guys kind of play-by-play and just have a conversation talking about what it means. We may be celebrating, all right, we made the playoffs if the Steelers get that win tonight, right? And that would be fun. So especially with everything that's happened this year, man. All the adversity this team's faced, and here we are 2 weeks out, potentially clinching a playoff spot. I'm happy with this team. I'm proud of this team, man, as many people said yesterday. So it's going to be interesting. And iRock in the chat, W stream. iRock, it's always a W stream when you swing through, brother. We appreciate you, man, for sure. So, all right, if you guys would hit that like button, hit subscribe, click the bell icon if you're new here. Thanks for making us a part of your afternoon. We'll be back this evening. Also, in the comments, let me know, how do you feel about these playoff scenarios? How do you feel about the team, both positive and negative? We want to hear from everybody. Just keep it respectful and let us know in the comments. There's nothing I love better, man, grabbing a cup of coffee in the morning, going to YouTube and reading the comments and just seeing kind of where everybody's at. So make sure we're keeping that comment section filled up. Everybody have a wonderful afternoon. My name's Clayton. This is PTA. Go Pack Go.
Here we go.
We're out.
Bye, guys.